الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الغرر الميامين سيما بقية الله في الأراضين وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين سيدنا وإمام زماننا وصاحب نعمتنا وولي أمرنا مهدي هذه الأمة وطاووس أهل الجنة الحجة بن الحسن العسكري فداه أرواح العالمين. Brothers and sisters, سماحة السيد, السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. We are eternally thankful and forever grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the opportunity bestowed upon us to once again be at the doorstep of the greatest and most majestic sacrifice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To be invited yet again to the banquet of Ashuraa and the saga of Karbala. This, brothers and sisters, is one of the greatest gifts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has selected us to be recipients of this great and infinitely blissful offering. We are thankful to Allah because one of the things we get to do in this season of mourning and lamentation, which includes many, many great opportunities and gifts and blessings, but one of them is the fact that we get to share the grief of Rasulullah, God's great messenger. We share the grief of the commander of the faithful. We share in the grief of the mistress of the women of the world, Fatima al-Zahra. We all know, brothers and sisters, that Ashuraa isn't just about Imam Hussein. Ashuraa is about God's messenger. When they massacred Imam Hussein and his family and his band of supporters, what they really intended to do was to trample on the message of Rasulullah. What they intended to do was to erase the name of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the name of Fatima, the name of Hassan. Ashuraa is about Islam and its ideals and its values and its principles. Ashuraa is about God Almighty Himself. This is why we commemorate, brothers and sisters. And so next time, if a Muslim from a different school of thought or different denomination approached you saying, well, why do you lament the tragedy of Hussein the way you do? What you should do is to turn the tables around and say, well, why don't you lament the tragedy of Hussein? Having known that the Messenger of Allah said over and over again, Husaynun minni wa ana min Husayn. Why don't you offer condolences to the Prophet of God, to Amir al-Mu'mineen and to Fatima al-Zahra? We commemorate this occasion because it isn't just about an individual, rather it's about the whole system of ideals and values and principles that make up the religion of Islam. And so we're forever grateful to this gift. This is why in one of the visitations of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein in Mafatih al-Jinan, it's ziyarah number 7. But it's famously known as ziyarat warith. The way you begin this visitation, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam is the one who narrates the ziyarah. He says that if you were honored by being at the majestic mausoleum of Hussein, then qif ala bab al-ha'ir, you should stand at the gate closest to the shrine of Imam al-Hussein And you begin your visitation as such. You say, Allahu Akbar kabira, walhamdulillahi kathira, subhanallahi bukratan wa asila. You begin by glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by praising the Almighty Lord, by saying that God is the greatest of all in this entire universe. He's the creator of life and death. And then you say, Alhamdulillah alladhi hadana lihada wa ma kunna linahtadi lawla an hadana Allah laqad ja'at rusul rabbina bil haqq. Praise be to God for having guided us, for having shown us the light that is Hussein. And had it not been for the guidance of Allah, had it not been for the fact that God chose each and every one of us to be introduced to the glory of Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam, we would never have been guided. We would have been lost. Praise be to Allah for having connected us to the axis of Hussein, having made us planets, albeit small and insignificant, that orbit around the sun of Hussein. لَقَدْ جَاءَتْ رُسُلُ رَبِّنَا بِالْحَقِّ. God and His messengers are truthful. Their message has proven time and again to be the absolute truth. Then you say, عَبْدُكَ وَابْنُ عَبْدِكَ وَابْنُ أَمَتِكَ جَاءَكَ مُسْتَجِيرًا بِكَ الْمُقِرُّ بِالرِّقِّ جَاءَكَ مُسْتَجِيرًا بِكَ. I am your slave, O Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. Choose me, give me the honor to be someone who is at your service. وَابْنُ عَبْدِكَ وَابْنُ أَمَتِكَ. And I am here to do what? To seek refuge in you. You all know what a refugee is. A refugee, an asylum seeker, is someone who is running from forces that may be threatening his or her life. And what they normally do, as the refugee crisis last year proved, is that these people who are running for their lives, or who are trying to protect their families or their livelihoods, they go to another place where they feel safe. A place where they can seek refugee status, where they can seek asylum, where they can feel that they have an entity or a society that is willing to protect them. We say to Imam al-Hussein, جَاءَكَ مُسْتَجِيرًا بِكَ. In Ziyarat al-Jami'ah we say, لَا إِذَنْ بِقُبُورِكُمْ. We are here to seek refuge in you, O Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. Refuge from what? Not necessarily from bodily harm. In fact, if anything, bodily harm is what we struggle with. It's what we grapple with when we identify ourselves as followers of Imam al-Hussein. We seek refuge in Hussein from those who are trying to lead us astray from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it's a great blessing, brothers and sisters, to once again be invited over to this blessed banquet, this great opportunity where the greatest people in history have made their most momentous decisions at the banquet of Imam al-Hussein. They have altered their lives during the season of Ashuraa and Muharram. And in light of the teachings and examples and inspiration of Imam al-Hussein, it's a great opportunity, brothers and sisters. Let's not miss this opportunity. Some of us, like myself, we enter the season of Hussein and we exit at the end of it without having achieved much. And yet there are those who enter this season and come out the other end having received the honor that they have prayed for throughout their lives. What's that honor? It's where we say, يَا لَيْتَنَا كُنَّا مَعَكُمْ فَنَفُوزَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. Imam al-Ridha says to Ar-Rayyan ibn Shabib, he says, if you wish to receive the greatest rewards, you should always constantly pray to Allah. And in that prayer, what you say is, I wish I were with you, O Aba Abdullah, O companions of Hussein. فَنَفُوزَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. For there is no greater victory than to be counted among the supporters of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Some of us are able to achieve that. We should aspire to something higher than just to listen to a few lectures and sermons, crying as great an act as that is, sharing the grief of Rasulullah as great as that is, but we should aspire for even higher levels of prosperity, higher levels of victory. When it comes to material things, we always have great aspirations, right? We always want the best. When it comes to spiritual achievements, when it comes to the levels of paradise, our aspirations, our ambitions should be pushed to the highest possible limits. Tonight is Thursday night. One of the things we do is recite Dua Kumail. What do we say in Dua Kumail? Allahumma ja'alni min ahsani abidika nasiban 'indak. وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لديك. Oh Allah, a lot of people are praying tonight. A lot of people are supplicating tonight. A lot of people are trying to seek nearness to God. But if there is one prayer I want you to answer, it's this: make me among the best of those people who pray to you. Make me among those who are in closest proximity to you. That's a great dua. If you ever want to make one prayer, make it this. In one of the ziyarat of Imam al-Hussein, we also say this: Allahumma ahyini hayata Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa amitni mamata Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Think about this for a moment, brothers and sisters. What an incredible dua this is. What an impossible feat this is to achieve. What do we say? We say, oh Allah, make me live the life of Muhammad and his holy and pure progeny. The life of Muhammad and his progeny? Are you kidding me? The things they had to endure, the pain, the misery, the struggle, the great deeds, all that, and yet it's still okay and preferable for me to make this prayer, because it doesn't hurt to aspire. It doesn't hurt to have lofty ambitions. It doesn't hurt to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so you ask for the best. Don't say, oh Allah, make me among those who enter paradise even if it's at the very doorstep. No. Say, I want to be raised with Hussein. Have ambition. In Salatul Eid, we also make this prayer that once again nudges us to have great ambitions and great aspirations. What is it? Allahumma inni as'aluka khayra ma sa'alaka ibaduka as-salihun wa a'udhu bika mimma ista'adha minhu ibaduka al-mukhlasun. Oh God, I ask you, if you ever run out of things to pray for, if you don't know what to ask, then you ask for the very best. You say, oh Allah, I ask you for all the things that your most loyal servants asked for. And I ask you to protect me from all the things that your best creatures asked for. On the day of Ashuraa, listen to this. Imam al-Hussein said something to Khurr that I have never seen him say regarding any other member of his army or even his family members. It's absolutely mind-boggling. If you come across another instance where Imam al-Hussein has said this, please let me know. And I'll quote you tomorrow, inshallah. But I've never seen Imam al-Hussein say anything like this. What did he say? When the Imam approached the body of Al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, drenched in his own blood, Imam al-Hussein looked at him. He then said, قَتْلَةٌ كَقَتْلَةِ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ وَأَوْلَادِ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ. Wow, what a death you have just experienced. What an end this is for you. Your death resembles that of the messengers of God, the apostles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and their children. Have lofty ambitions. And so, the point I'm trying to make, brothers and sisters, is that we enter this very special season that has been for centuries and will continue to be one of the greatest launching pads for the highest aspirations and ideals. This is an opportunity not to be missed. So when you enter into this season, make sure that number one, you raise your expectations of yourself. You raise your ambitions and your aspirations, and then you submit to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. You give in to his inspiration and his example, and ask him to take your hand and raise you to the level of his companions, inshallah. And isn't it amazing? Isn't it absolutely mind-boggling that we still get together year after year, decade after decade, century after century, to commemorate the tragedy of Imam al-Hussein? Not just us in this part of the world, but in every corner of this planet. Men, women, and children are swarming towards their local mosques and in buildings that have been erected in the name of Hussein. That's what Husayniyya means. It's a house of Hussein. It's a house where the tragedy of Hussein is lamented. People all over the world get together to sob, to weep, to lament, and to eulogize Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. And the reason that is so incredible is that if you think about it, time is Einstein's fourth dimension. Time is one of the greatest forces in the universe. Without it, our universe wouldn't exist. But on a personal level, time has the power to erase even the most powerful memories. Right? You go through very difficult, very joyous, very festive, very happy, very sad moments in your life, and yet a few years later, a few decades later, all those memories fade into oblivion, right? Time has that power. Sometimes you come across an event in your life that is so powerful, that is so impactful, that it is permanently carved in the very fabric of your brain, right? Those very special moments, both good and bad, they're very difficult to forget. And yet, think about this for a moment. While those memories might be retained by our brains, the emotions associated with those memories fade into oblivion, right? It becomes a footnote in your life. It's not something that you react to the way you did when that event transpired. Let me give you a very basic example. Say I die today. This would be, or I'd like to think, that it would be a very painful, difficult time for my loved ones, for my family, for my children, right? They will react in a very emotional manner. They will cry, they will weep. It happens because we're emotional, sentient beings. And yet, 10 years from now, if you ask my children, if you ask my family how, or if they could recollect the memory of my death, right? They'll probably remember a lot of details about it because it was so traumatic and so emotional for them. But it won't invoke the same sets of memories, would it? In fact, forget 10 years from now. In 6 months' time, they won't cry or sob or lament the way they did on the day of my death. In fact, the next day they will cry and weep in a manner that it's slightly less than the day itself. The day after that, it'll be slightly less yet again, and so on and so forth, right? So the emotions will be erased even if the memory itself is retained. And yet, there is this event that transpired 14 centuries ago in the middle of the desert, on the bank of the Euphrates River. A handful of people in a showdown with over 30,000 armed men. They were massacred, they were killed. And yet, today, Hussein is here. Hussein is now. Hussein is today. Hussein is Hussein. 14 centuries after the fact, not only has the event itself been permanently imprinted on the human soul, but the same sets of emotions, the same plethora of feelings are invoked every time the name of Hussein is mentioned. Not only that, but just think about this for a moment. Every year, it's like when the month of Muharram begins on a night like this, we're counting down to the event. We don't think of it as something that happened in bygone times. We think of it as something that's about to happen in 10 days' time. On the day of Ashuraa, it's as if Imam al-Hussein is killed today. Now, let me ask you this. Time being this incredibly destructive and disruptive power of the universe, who has the power to defy it? Who or what has the ability to undo the power of time? It's God himself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's God that brings us here together. It's God that ensures that Hussein's name endures and perseveres, not just in spite of the power of the passage of time, but in spite of all the endless tyrants and despots that have come and gone and tried their luck at erasing the name of Imam al-Hussein and failed miserably at that. It's God who makes sure that Hussein is remembered and that his companions are immortalized and that anyone who honors Hussein continues to be honored and glorified. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now why would God do this? The answer is simple. Because Hussein's saga isn't a history lesson. The story of Imam al-Hussein is one that we struggle with on a daily basis. It's about the ultimate showdown between good and evil, vice and virtue, right and wrong. And these are notions that we struggle with on a daily basis. These are questions that we contend with all the time. And to have a moral compass that is Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, his teachings, his examples, his story on the day of Ashuraa, to have him as our moral compass makes it a lot easier for us to struggle with those notions that we face on a daily basis, right? I've always said this and I'll say it again. Whenever you're confused, whenever you're unsure about whether or not you should do something, invoke the name of Imam al-Hussein. Ask yourself, what would Hussein do? Because in doing so, you create a level of lucidity and clarity that is unmistakably that of Hussein. It makes it so clear whether the act you're about to embark on is good or it is not. Imam Hussein is immortalized by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because he represents the epitome of the camp of good in opposition to the camp of evil and bad, right? Sometimes, brothers and sisters, let me mention this as well. Sometimes the name of Imam al-Hussein, it's important for us to invoke him because we might make certain steps that would ultimately lead us to our own self-destruction, right? Let me give you an example. So you have those decisions which are clearly good and those decisions which are clearly bad. There's no question, there are no ifs or buts, right? But then sometimes we make small incremental steps that might lead us down the track of either good or bad, right? And it's at that, with those decisions and with those incremental steps, that it's a little more confusing. It's not as easy and it's not as clear for us to tell the difference between good and evil, right? And this is really the story of the people of Kufa. The people of Kufa, not in their wildest dreams could they imagine themselves siding with the camp of Yazid and taking part in the massacre of Abu Abdullah. Not once did any of them imagine that they would be capable of such a heinous, deplorable crime. Why? Because the people of Kufa were the inhabitants of the capital city of Amir al-Mu'mineen. The people of Kufa grew up with Imam al-Hussein. They grew up with Imam al-Hassan. They were his neighbors. They were his supporters. They were people who took part in the battles and wars of Amir al-Mu'mineen against his enemies. Not in their wildest dreams. And yet they did that. How? They took small incremental steps. It wasn't so obvious when Ibn Ziyad came into the city of Kufa. Ibn Ziyad came to Kufa, and the first thing he did, I don't know if you know this, but the first thing he did was he criminalized supporting Muslim ibn Aqil. It wasn't even about Imam Hussein. It was about a rebellion that had to be crushed. It was about an insurgency that had to be prevented. It was about law and order. It was about, you know what? The Muslim nation is safe. The Muslim nation is doing fine. Yes, we have a change of regime, but let's not disrupt the status quo. So if anyone supports Muslim ibn Aqil, that would constitute a crime. That's it. And so people took that first incremental step in abandoning their oath of allegiance to Muslim ibn Aqil and ultimately to Imam al-Hussein. لعن الله أمة أسرجت وألجمت وتنقبت لقتالك. May God curse the people of Kufa when they first took their saddles and placed it on the back of their horses. Not just when they killed Imam al-Hussein. When they took that very first step, they became cursed by Allah. When they put their feet in the stirrup of their horses, they were cursed. When they wore their turbans and wrapped their face with a mask, they were cursed. As we recite in dua, Ziyarat Ashuraa. And so the first step was to criminalize any material support to Muslim ibn Aqil. So people said, you know what? There's no harm. We're trying to protect ourselves and our families. Why put ourselves in harm's way? So Muslim ibn Aqil, you go on your way, we go on ours. Step number one. Step number two, Ibn Ziyad said that you have to come to the mosque. He summoned the city of Kufa to go to the mosque and to listen to his sermon as the representative of the king. That was their second mistake. Why go listen to a tyrant or the representative of a tyrant? Why go listen to someone that you know is a deviant? من استمع إلى ناطق فقد عبد فإن كان الناطق عن الله فقد عبد الله. As Imam al-Ridha alayhi salam says. He says, you can't listen to just about anyone. The only person you're permitted to give your time and your ears to listen to are righteous people, are godly people. If you listen to someone else, even out of curiosity, even because you're trying to know what they have to say, you're not allowed to do that. وَإِن كَانَ النَّاطِقُ عَنِ الشَّيْطَانِ فَقَدْ عَبَدَ الشَّيْطَانِ. If this person speaks on behalf of the devil, you've worshipped the devil simply by listening to them, even if you don't agree with them. You're not allowed to listen to anyone, to read any book. Scholars talk about this. They talk about the concept of kutub al-dhalal, books of deviation. So that was their second mistake. Then Ibn Ziyad said, you have to come and renew your oath of allegiance to the legitimate Khalifa of the Messenger of God. You have to come and renew your pledge. So people thought to themselves, well, you know what? Renewing a pledge of allegiance, we could do that. It doesn't have to be sincere, it doesn't have to be real. I mean, it's just a pledge, it's just a statement, and it's just an oath. But our hearts are still with Imam al-Hussein. We still love you, we still support you. But you know what? To protect our own lives, we'll give a pledge of allegiance to Ibn Ziyad. Mistake number three. And then Ibn Ziyad said, you have to carry your weapons and go to the city outskirts, just at the main gate to the city of Kufa. Nothing about killing Imam Hussein, nothing about going to war with the son of the Messenger of Allah. It was just a show. It was a military parade. Carry your weapons, go to the city gates. That's it. People say, you know what? How is that going to harm anyone? Let's just go out there. But step after step, and decision after decision, and it led them into the dismal, endless, abyssal hole of the fires of hell. It's important that we try and invoke the name of Imam al-Hussein so that we don't end up making those small incremental mistakes as the people of Kufa did. Now, brothers and sisters, to wrap up, and we're getting close to the time of Salah, in order to seek proximity to Hussein and to board the ark of his salvation, Safinatul Najat, Misbah al-Huda, in order for me to salvage myself from my own evils and my own perils and my own sins, and seek proximity to the warmth of the light of the lantern of guidance that is Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, there are certain things that we need to do, right? There are a few very important steps that you have to make the decision to do on this first night, inshallah. The first is this: to have deep, unconditional trust in the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, to paraphrase, to have faith in God, right? To have faith in God means to believe Him. That really was the core of the conflict between the Bani Umayyah and Bani Hashim. Imam al-Sadiq says that the difference between us and Bani Umayyah, it was never about any tribal feud, right? The conflict, the war, the disagreement was about one thing and one thing alone. The Imam said, قُلْنَا صَدَقَ اللَّهُ وَقَالُوا كَذَبَ اللَّهُ. We believed in God, they belied God. We trusted God, they abandoned God. Yazid said, لا خبر جاء ولا وحي نزل. There's no such thing as heaven and hell. All those things are fairy tales made up by the Prophet and his progeny. And yet, the companions of Imam al-Hussein, let's set Imam al-Hussein and his family aside for a moment. The companions of Hussein, who were ordinary people just like you and I, they came from ordinary backgrounds. None of them was extraordinary. None of them had any special powers. None of them was like a king or queen. They were ordinary people, just like you, just like me. What set them apart, what made them these lofty characters in history that no one can even aspire to reach, was the fact that they put their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever God says, it's true. Because think about it, their struggle wasn't just an uphill battle. That's an understatement of the biggest magnitude. What it was a mission impossible. It was a suicide mission. No one in their right mind, if they're trying to survive in this petty, materialistic little world of ours, would venture out the way the companions of Imam al-Hussein did, would put their lives in harm's way the way they did, right? Let me give you one example. Aoun was Imam Hussein's stepbrother. He was a brother to Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas from both parents. He was the son of al-Bani and also the son of Amir al-Mu'minin. His name isn't usually mentioned during the nights of Ashuraa and Muharram because, well, we talk about Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. But let me just talk a little bit about him. Just mention one stance that he took which shows you the level of faith these people had, the level of trust they had in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So on the day of Ashuraa, he's about to leave for the battlefield. You know how old he was, by the way? He was 16 years old. A 16-year-old boy. He leaves the tent of Imam al-Hussein after getting his blessing and his permission to leave. He stands at the very door of the tent. فَجَاءَتْهُ السِّهَامُ كَالْمَطَرِ. They began to shower the arrows at his direction. Now, you know what an arrow is, brothers and sisters? Every arrow is worse than a knife stab. It's long. There's a metal head. Sometimes it's a three-pronged arrow. Now imagine hundreds, possibly thousands of arrows coming down at your direction like rain. So Imam al-Hussein looks at him. He's trying to perhaps test him, but I would like to think to show what a great person this was, because this statement becomes forever carved in the history of mankind for us to be inspired by it. The Imam said to him, "My brother, how can you go when you see all these arrows raining down at you? Do you know what he said to the Imam? It was mind-boggling. 16-year-old boy. He said to him, أخي يا أبا عبد الله من كان باذلا فيك مهجتك لا يبالي بالكثرة والقلة. Oh brother, oh Aba Abdullah, the one who's already made up his mind and has decided to give the blood of his heart in your way, couldn't care less about numbers. I couldn't care less whether it's 1 arrow or 10 million arrows, because I'm here with one mission, and that mission is to die trying to protect you, O Aba Abdullah. The level of faith they had was incredible, brothers and sisters. But you might think this is inaccessible, it's beyond reach, but it's not. Have trust in Allah. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that your sustenance is guaranteed, don't go toward that which is haram, that which is impermissible. Then just don't. Have trust that God will look after you. When God says, get married even if you don't have the financial means, even if you're struggling with this or that, do it for the sake of God. When God says, go to Hajj or Ziyarah, even if that might prove challenging or difficult, put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do it, knowing that Allah will look after you, He will take care of you. Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashuraa put a copy of the Quran over his head in a gesture that reminds everyone of Hadith al-Thaqalayn, that the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt are inseparable, that they will forever be together. He put the Quran over his head, then he went towards the enemy. One reporter who was recording the events of the day says that Imam al-Hussein approached. He began to glorify and praise Allah in a manner that I had never heard before. Then he said, "O people, you know I am the grandson of Rasulullah." Then the Imam said these words. He says, "Inna waliyya Allah." Do you know who I have supporting me? You might think that there are thousands upon thousands of you out to kill me, and all I have is 18 members of my own family and 70 odd men who constitute my camp, my band of supporters. You might think that you could crush me in an instant, but let me tell you something. Inna waliyyi Allah. I have God on my side. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will look after me. And sure, they killed Imam al-Hussein. But where are Bani Umayyah today? Where is Yazid today? Where is Muawiyah today? Other than in a grave that no one even knows the location of. Where are they other than being cursed by millions upon millions of people? And yet take a look at the shrine of Hussein during the Arba'in Ziyarah, and you just get a glimpse, you see the tip of the iceberg of the grandeur of Hussein. Inna wali Allah. Have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, point number one. Point number two, brothers and sisters, belittle this petty world of the dunya. This world will come to an end, and it will come to an end sooner and faster than you and I think. And since we're all going to die anyway, let's die honorably. Let's die having cleansed ourselves and protected and guarded ourselves from the transgressions and sins of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's die with honor as opposed to dying with disgrace. Hayhat min madhillah was the immortal motto of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein on the day of Ashuraa. Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, remember Imam al-Kadhim was imprisoned in a dungeon deep in the earth, a place where he couldn't tell whether it was day or night, right? He was imprisoned under these circumstances. He writes a letter to Harun al-Abbasi. Where Imam al-Kadhim was, we know. Where was Harun? Harun was in fortified palaces, and he was the king of the known world at the time. And yet Imam al-Kadhim speaks to him as such. He writes him a letter, and he says to him that you should know that every day that passes and lapses from my pain and agony is also a day that lapses from your joy and prosperity. And yet, after that, we will both die. And on the day of judgment, we will be raised on a day ليس فيه انقضاء يخسر فيه المبطلون. And on that day, which will never end, by the way, on that day we will recognize who is the winner and who is the loser. اقض ما أنت قاض إنما تقضي هذه الحياة الدنيا. The sorcerers of Fir'aun, when he said that I will crucify you, I will murder you, I will kill you for having submitted to Musa alayhi salam, what did they say? They said to him, do whatever you want to do, because your authority will not surpass the confines of this petty, limited world of ours. You have no authority in the hereafter. You have no authority in the eternal life that comes beyond this. اقض ما أنت قاض. Do what you will. Kill us if you must. To see the world as the petty and transient and temporary place that it is, brothers and sisters. This is what gave the confidence for the companions of Imam al-Hussein to do what they did, those heroic acts on the day of Ashuraa. Prophet Isa alayhi salam one day comes across the dunya epitomized in a toothless old woman, the hadith says. It's a beautiful hadith. The dunya is epitomized, it's embodied in a toothless old woman. And the hadith is narrated by the Holy Messenger of Allah. So Isa says to the dunya, to this toothless old woman, he says to her, I see you covered with all kinds of ornaments. She had all kinds of means of seducing people. He said to her, the people that you marry, in other words, the people that you're able to seduce, right? What happens to them? Do they all die or do you end up divorcing them? She said, بَلْ كُلُّهُمْ قَتَلْت. Now this is one gold digger who's not going to be satisfied with taking your money after you die. I killed each and every one of them, she said. So Isa alayhi salam says, بُؤْسًا وَتَعْسًا. Misery be upon the men who are seduced by you, not taking a lesson from all the previous husbands of yours that you murdered and ended up getting nothing out of you. Let's recognize that this world is temporary, it is transient, it will lapse, it will come to an end. Meanwhile, let's have our sights at the hereafter, at the day Imam al-Hussein will be the master of the youth of paradise. I will end, brothers and sisters. Imam al-Hussein's memory continues, but so does our lamentation for him. Imam al-Rida says to one of his companions, Al-Rayyan ibn Shabib, he says to him, Ya ibn Shabib, people cry for all sorts of different reasons, but tears were made to be shed over one tragedy, and that is the tragedy of Hussein. Ya ibn Shabib, in kunta bakiyan ala shay. If you're going to cry for something truly worthy of crying, فَابْكِ عَلَى الْحُسَيْنِ ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. Then you should cry for the tragedy of Hussein. Then Imam al-Rida alludes to just one aspect of the tragedy of Imam al-Hussein, which I'll mention right now. He says, فَإِنَّهُ ذُبِحَ كَمَا يُذْبَحُ الْكَبْشِ. Because Hussein was slaughtered like a sheep. Now why does Imam al-Rida alayhi salam use this analogy? Why does he say he was slaughtered like a sheep? There are many different meanings that we can deduce from this analogy, from this euphemism of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. One of which I can only talk about on the day of Ashuraa. And even then, out of respect for Imam al-Zaman, I won't be able to delve into too much. But there are other aspects that I can mention tonight. One of them is this. Usually, a sheep is slaughtered in a festivity, right? It's when you're celebrating, it's when you're inviting people over a banquet, it's when you're sharing your happiness with members of your family, your neighbors, your community. That's when you slaughter, that's when you sacrifice a sheep to offer it to the people that you love. And so you celebrate the sacrifice of a sheep. Imam al-Rida is reminding us that those madmen, when they killed Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, they were celebrating in mad hysteria. on the day of Ashuraa. When they killed Abu Abdullah, they began clapping and whistling and screaming, saying, Allahu Akbar, laqad qatalna al-Husayn ibn Fatima. Imam Rida wants to remind us that the day of Ashuraa was a festivity, it was a celebration. So we should take it as a tragedy and a somber memory. The second reason perhaps Imam Rida is using the analogy of a sheep is this. When you look at a sheep, sheep are raised to be slaughtered. And so if someone slaughtered a sheep, no one would blame them. No one would say, why did you slaughter a sheep? But if you slaughtered a cat, all kinds of people will object. If you slaughtered a lion, a tiger, any other animal, and people would object, and they would say, well, why would you do this? But slaughtering a sheep is no. Sayyid ibn Abdullah was the one who stood in front of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn, guarding him from the arrows that were being shot at him, that rained at Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. He stood there. Historians say that he guarded Abu Abdullah, كان يقر الرماح والسهام والسيوف بوجهه ونحره وصدره. He would protect the Imam from the onslaught of the enemy using what? His shield? Not his shield, but his face and his neck. Why would he have to use his face and neck as a shield? Because he was so meticulous and careful so as not to let a single arrow reach Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. In order to do that, he had to look at the arrows approaching. He couldn't risk using his shield because he used his eyes to ensure that no arrow approached Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. And so he guarded the Imam with his face and his neck. As soon as Imam al-Husayn finished Salatul Dhuhr, he fell to the ground. Imam al-Husayn approached him. He looked up. Listen to what he said to the Imam, to his master. He said, Sayyidi ya Abu Abdullah, awafayt. Oh, Abu Abdullah, was I loyal to you? Why is he apologizing to Imam al-Husayn? Allahu Akbar. Two things come to my mind. The first is that he might be saying, oh Abu Abdullah, I did what I did. I shielded you with my face and my neck. But I'm sorry because I couldn't withhold long enough for you to perform Salatul Asr. Abu Abdullah al-Husayn was not allowed to pray Salatul Asr on the day of Ashura. He apologizes to the Imam. He says, I wish I had more strength to be able to stand and guard you from those arrows, but I don't. The second reason why he might be apologizing is this. It's almost as though he is saying, Ya Abu Abdullah, I am now on the ground and I have you to come and hold me in your lap, to give me comfort and consolation as I'm about to surrender my soul. But it's only a few hours, oh Abu Abdullah, when you will be laying on the ground and there is no one to come and give you comfort. Oh Abu Abdullah, it's only a few hours before your cries, ألا هل من ناصر ينصرنا لوجه الله ألا هل من ذاب يذب عن حرم رسول الله. These cries will be overheard by none other than Ruqayya, your daughter, Ya Abu Abdullah. Imagine what happens to Ruqayya when she hears her father pleading for help. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. العلي العظيم إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. Sending our salams to Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. It doesn't matter how far you are from his shrine. Abu Abdullah hears your salam and he answers your salam. وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليكم مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. صلوات على محمد.